All right, this is always outnumbered, always outgunned chapter lessons, starting on page 126, section 1. What did she say? Darrow asked with little interest. He and his only friend, Socrates Fortlow, were sitting on a redwood bench in Carver Park in Watts. She didn't say anything. Socrates was remembering his mother and how he was so surprised that she had gotten older, even in his dream. Her hair, the little he could see of it under her Sunday hat, had gone white, and there was a heaviness to her face. This is an interesting paragraph. He's actually dreaming about his mother. That's why I thought she was real, he said out loud. Say what? Darrow looked around nervously at the ragged trees. I mean, said the ex-convict, when she died, when I was in jail, she was only 52. But she was way older than that in the dream. It was like she never died, and just grew older and older. Huh, the boy said. In the few months since he'd left home to come live with Socrates, he'd shot up 4 inches, that means to grow 4 inches, but hadn't gained a pound. He was long and bony, almost as tall as the hefty or thick, hard-muscled Socrates. Aren't you listening to me, boy? Socrates glanced in the direction that Darrow kept looking. Do you see him? Do you see him? Not yet, Darrow said, but he always is coming from over that way, or he always comes from that way. Well, stop looking over there. He's going to know how scared you are if he sees you looking. Here, look at me. Darrow turned his head and squinted at Socrates. He was trembling or shaking. So what do you think? Socrates asked the boy. What do I think about what? Darrow whined. About my dream, that's what. About your mother? Yeah. Was she nice to you? The boy's adolescent voice cracked from the approaching manhood and fear. Adolescence is the time, your teenage years, and so the boy hasn't quite fully made it through adolescence because his voice is cracking. Oh yeah, Socrates said, my mother was the only one that stuck by me, the only one. To stick by someone means to be trustworthy and to support you. Because, Darrow said, I've been dreaming about Yvette Frank sometimes. Yeah? I'm going to skip this part. Darrow leaned down quickly, plucking a long blade or knife of tattered grass, a long blade or piece of tattered grass from underneath the bench. He twirled the shoot or piece of grass, squashing it until the light-colored pads of his forefinger and thumb took on a greenish tint. That's okay, Socrates said. That's how you dream when you're a boy. You're dreaming about manhood. Socrates stared out across the littered lawn of the park. At a picnic bench not far from them, 4 men had begun a lively game of dominoes. 25! Trevor Brown shouted as he slapped down his bone. A bone is another word for a domino. Socrates recognized Trevor from the South Central Flea Market and Fair down at the Avalon Shopping Center. The mall had gone bust, or it had closed in 1988. Now the supermarket and stores were broken up into stalls that people rented by the day, the week, or the month. You could get anything from music discs to power tools at the flea market fair. Trevor Brown sold T-shirts that his daughter hand-painted with images of African warriors and statuesque women. Statuesque means that they look like a statue. We usually mean beautiful or remarkable. Socrates had rented a stall now and then to sell junk that he'd collected and repaired in his spare time. That was before he had become a food packager and delivery man for Bounty Supermarket. When Trevor raised his head in a victorious grin, he caught sight of Socrates. Socrates waved and Trevor gave him a happy nod. Beyond the men came a group of 3 boys, 12 to 14-year-olds, tough-looking children with tennis shoes that had no laces and jeans that hung low on their hips. They seemed heavy in their big coats, ambling or walking slowly forward like a mob of unruly bear cubs. The men stopped their game a moment to gauge or decide on the threat of the children. Darrow looked up from his mangled blade of grass. He put his hand on Socrates' thigh. "Is that him?" Socrates asked in a voice that held absolutely no emotion. "Uh-huh." "Then let's get on with it." "I can't." "You got to, Darrow. There isn't any other choice." Darrow's eyes pleaded with Socrates, but the ex-con showed no sympathy. He stood up and walked away. He went in a wide arc, so as to avoid the attention of the rolling gang of boys. He went over to the group of men playing dominoes. "Hey, Trevor," Socrates hailed. At the same time, the head bear cub pup Philip yelled, "Hey, punk, I told you to stay out of here." Section 2. "Your boy's in trouble over there, Mr. Fortlow," Trevor said when Socrates made it to their table. He had not looked back until then. He didn't want to witness Darrow running scared. But Darrow wasn't running. He faced the shorter, heavier Philip. The other two boys stayed a couple of yards back. Darrow was holding out his hands in a reasoning posture. A reasoning posture is to say, let's not fight, let's talk. Good, Socrates thought. With those long arms, he has the advantage. In a fight, if you have longer arms, then you can hit the person before they hit you. "You hear me, Socko?" Trevor Brown asked. "Say what?" Socrates was watching the boys closely. The men around him were talking, asking questions, but Socrates just stared. Nothing was real except those boys. Philip took a wild overhand swing at Darrow, who leaned back, wobbled a little bit, and then bounced forward with a textbook right cross. It's a way of hitting. The fist found its target on Philip's chin. The hard little gangbanger didn't even flinch, or didn't even notice the fist hitting him. Darrow had good training and more courage than most, but he didn't have enough muscle to back it up. Socrates took a deep breath and held it. Someone put a hand on his shoulder. Socrates stiff-armed whoever it was that touched him. He heard the man's whoop and the sound of dominoes skittering around, which means that Socrates pushed away the man, and the man hit the table and upset the dominoes. Darrow produced a steak knife from somewhere in his pants, but Philip slapped it right out of the boy's bony hands. Somebody shouted, "Hey, what the?" But Socrates didn't hear the rest of what was said because he was moving. Philip's fist made a meaty connection with Darrow's jaw, and even though the lanky or skinny boy was tying up his attacker the way Socrates had taught him to tie up your attacker means to hold on to him, it wouldn't be long before Darrow was hurt bad. Socrates kicked off his shoes to get better traction in the grass. Close to 60, he didn't feel old because hot blood was moving in him. He went quickly and quietly behind Philip's two friends. Darrow doubled over from a fist to his gut, which means that Darrow got punched in the stomach. The first boy went down from a slap behind his head. Darrow screamed and twisted on the ground as a heavy foot barely missed his face. "Hey!" was all the second boy could get out before he was slapped senseless by Socrates. But Philip hadn't seen his friends go down. He hit Darrow with a flying body slam. Darrow was screeching while Socrates disarmed the prone boys. Prone means laying down without moving. He pulled a Glock, which is a type of gun, a rusty .22, which is a type of small gun, and a switchblade knife from their clothes. "Turn over," Philip shouted. Darrow was lying on his stomach with his hands and arms up over his ears. "Turn over!" Philip's words were loud and slurred with passion. With his left hand, he was trying to force Darrow to turn over. In his right hand, he held up a .45 automatic, which is another type of gun. "Help!" Darrow shouted, and then, "Please, please, please!" Socrates slapped the gun from the upheld hand. When Philip turned around to see who it was, he got slapped so hard that he tumbled over twice, coming to rest in a heap. "All right," shouted a domino player. The others were cheering. The other two boys were trying to rise, but they didn't know where they were. Socrates yanked Philip up by his arm. The boy was out, which means unconscious. Socrates pinched his cheek hard and twisted. The pain woke him up. Do you see me, boy? Do you hear me? Philip's head moved. Maybe it was a nod. Who are you? He asked. Socrates released him so that Philip stood up under his own power, on his uncertain feet. Socrates was going to hit him one more time. Once more, and he'd think twice before he messed around with Darrell again. Socrates grinned, thinking, 3 times and he'd be dead. But before even one more blow, Trevor Brown shouted out, Watch it! Watch out, Socko! The big man swung around, ready for his death, or someone else's. But what he saw almost made him laugh. Darrell stalked toward him on stiff legs, Philip's .45 automatic held out before him in both hands. The boy lurched, or moved stiffly from side to side as he approached, the pistol pointing anywhere and everywhere. When he came up beside Socrates, Darrell stopped and brought the wavering or moving muzzle up to about 2 feet from Philip's chest. That means he pointed the gun at Philip about 2 feet away. Philip's widely spaced small eyes came awake while he was staring at the gun. Darrell looked to Socrates and then back at Philip. Darrell's mouth opened in a wide, silent yowl. A yowl is a kind of yell. His eyes darted back and forth between friend and foe. Don't look at me, Socrates said. Darrell's aim got straighter, and Philip took off running. He ran straight past Darrell, then crouched low to avoid Socrates' wide grab. He ran screaming toward the domino table as Darrell swung around to fire. A domino man shouted. They all went down to the ground, but it wasn't necessary. When Socrates touched Darrell's arm, the boy released the gun, letting it fall, unfired, to the grass. Section 3. I was scared, Darrell sulked, staring down at Socrates' pitted linoleum floor. That was a good punch you gave that boy, Socrates answered. Right on the chin. Darrell sat up a little straighter. They'd come home carrying the knife and 3 pistols in a brown paper bag. You stood up for yourself, Darrell, Socrates said. That's all a black man could do. You're always outnumbered, and you're always outgunned. But they're going to still be after me, Darrell said. They are still going to want to get me. That's right, Socrates agreed, nodding. But now you have stood up. Now you have done your best, so you don't have anything to be sorry for. Not ever again in your life. How is that going to help me? You've done your job, Darrell. Now leave it up to me. They ate smoked ham hocks, which is a type of ham, served with mustard and rice for dinner. What's wrong, boy? Socrates asked. I don't know. Nothing, I guess. I mean, if I was like you, I wouldn't have any problems. If you were like me, you would have spent 10 years on a dirt farm hoping your daddy got drunk enough to pass out, because if he didn't, you'd get beaten with a thick cord. He did that to you? Darrell asked. For nothing? When he finally died, my mother cried. Not because he was dead, but because we lost the farm. Because we lost the farm. But I was happy until I realized without him, I didn't eat every night. No, Darrell, you don't want to be like me. You don't want to run wild in the street treating women like they were dogs, fighting and stealing and acting up until they put you in jail. Nah, man, you want to get out from under all that. You've got to. But I don't know how, Darrell said. After dinner, Socrates said, You take my bed tonight. I'll sleep out here on the couch. You worked hard today. You need a good sleep. As he fell off to sleep, Socrates knew that Darrell couldn't stay with him any longer. One day that gang of boys would find him. They'd either kill him or make him one of their own. Maybe not. It didn't always happen like that, but he didn't want to take the chance. You saved that boy's life, Trevor Brown had said in the park. Not yet, thought Socrates. Not yet. His mother entered in a dream. She was older, but still standing straight and tall. They were in the small front room in the house, in Cartersville. The picture window looked out over a field of jagged stumps of corn stalks. Socrates sat at a small table that had a fancy linen cloth across it. He was looking at his big hands while she stood next to the window that was filled with blue sky and the field of corn. The sun was so bright through the window that Mrs. Fortlow seemed to be in a shadow. Socrates couldn't even see her eyes. "What?" he asked, almost angry. He realized that he was in a conversation that had been going on for years. "What?" There was no answer. Socrates was going to rise. He was going to get up and make her understand how bad he felt. But he couldn't get up. He couldn't even lift his hands off the table. He felt so weak that he started crying. And while he cried, his waking mind wondered how many times had he sat before that blue window and his mother, crying. And then she moved. He was sure that this had never happened before. Another step, and he remembered all the times that he just wanted to say that he was sorry for the happiness that he had taken from her. That's interesting. Socrates is blaming himself for happiness that he took away from her. I wonder what that was. Another step, and he could see her eyes. They were pleading. They were asking for something, crying without tears. No words came from her wet lips. "What?" Socrates asked again. He lifted his hands. Somehow this changed things, and she was gone. All that was left was his chair, and the window full of sky and corn. Socrates had gotten smaller and smaller. Now he was no more than an ant peeking over the sill into a world larger than he could imagine. "No, Mama. No, stop it." Socrates opened his eyes. "No," said Darrell from his sleep in the other room. Socrates sat next to the fold-out sofa bed. He didn't touch Darrell or try to wake him up. He'd been taught that when he was a child that a man's dreams were private and should never be interrupted. And so Socrates sat for an hour or so until the shifting, moaning boy's eyes snapped open. "Hey," he said to the big man. "Hey." "I don't know if I could take this," Darrell said. "You don't know if you could take what?" "I dreamed that instead of you getting there in time, Philip shot me in the head. And we're going to skip that part too." Socrates laughed knowingly. Then he said, "Don't you worry, boy. I'm always going to be there on time." Darrell blinked once and turned over on his side. He was asleep in an instant, and Socrates wondered if the boy had ever been awake. Section 4. "But he can't stay down here any more," Socrates said to Luvia Prine. Wright Burke, Luvia's handicapped roomer and Socrates' best friend, was sitting between them. Darrell was out in the kitchen making M&M cookies with Luvia's niece, Wilhelmina. Why not? Luvia didn't like Socrates, but she liked his friends. She cared about Darrell and didn't even chastise Wright for going over now and then to see how the man and boy were doing. To chastise is to criticize. "You know how these gangster kids are," Socrates said. "They're going to get him on a drive-by or make him join up. You know how it is." "Let him go home to his mother, then," Luvia said. She stood up to show that the problem was settled and over. "He doesn't have a daddy at home, and that neighborhood his mama is in is right in the middle of all that," Wright said. He knew that the only way to get Luvia back in her seat was if he showed that he was worried too. Darrell's mother let him stay with Sacco because she knew he needed someone with a strong hand to help out. But even Sacco can't be there every minute. "What can I do about that, Mr. Burke?" the skinny, tall, hard-boned woman asked. "You know my house is for retired people like you and Mrs. Halloway and them. We can't have boys running wild in the halls." "There's the McDanielses," Wright whispered. Socrates was so nervous that he blinked. Luvia froze in mid-gesture. Her hand had been reaching, maybe for an itch on her cheek, but it stayed there, suspended a few inches from her face. "You know, you should be ashamed to let those words out of your mouth, Wright Burke," Luvia said at last. "You know it's a sin what you said." It's hard, the World War II veteran agreed. He lifted his mangled or damaged left hand in a gesture that was indecipherable or not able to be read. But it isn't a sin. Hallie and Costas lost a boy to the street. They lost Bernard. Now here comes a chance for them to do something about it. That's exactly right, Socrates said, feeling that they were the truest words that he had ever spoken. I might have to listen to Mr. Burke, Socrates Fortlow, Luvia said, but that doesn't mean I have to hear you. I know, Luvia, Socrates said, smiling. You don't like the way I smell, and I haven't even taken off my shoes. Wright chuckled. Socrates went on. And you're not wrong either. No, you're not wrong, but this isn't between you and me. This here is about a boy that's going to die. Luvia put both of her hands up like stop signs. I don't know if you're right or wrong, but that doesn't matter. I can't ask Hallie and Costas to take in anybody. They just buried Bernard. They're grieving. And they can't take care of anybody new after all of those doctor bills and the funeral. Bernard had been shot down at the house in View Park. He'd been cruising with some friends. They had words with another group of children. Shots were fired later on that night at a party. Bernard didn't die at first. For about a week, the doctors thought he might survive. But then he just lost the will to live. A fever, like fire, had burned out his life on the 8th day after the shooting. I took home $159.35 in a week. I take home $159.35 in a week, Socrates said. And I get maybe $75 in tips from home deliveries on top of that. All my tips could go to Daryl. And he got himself a job down at Bounty, so he doesn't need an allowance. Between him and me, we could pay for him to stay with them. Luvia sagged in her chair. Her stiff backbone couldn't take Socrates' weight. Her eyes hated him more and more. What good is it going to do to have Daryl over there? She pleaded with Wright. It's another school for him, Miss Prine. And the way over there near Hauser in Venice? And they are way over there near Hauser in Venice. Daryl'd have a chance over there. You know a boy trying deserves a chance. But how could I ask Hallie to do that? Luvia asked either man. Just ask them, just ask. Maybe they need another chance, Wright said. Socrates had been biting the inside of his cheek. Suddenly he felt his mouth fill with blood. He swallowed hard, swallowed again, and then nodded. Hallie and Costas McDaniels were staunch churchgoers, or serious churchgoers. That means they went to church often. They believed in the Lord and the Lord's righteous representatives. They didn't include the whiskey-breathed Wright, and certainly not a convicted murderer like Socrates Fortlow, to be the Lord's righteous representatives. Okay, Luvia said, standing again. I guess I could ask them. Wright yipped and hollered. He jumped up, out of his chair, and hugged Luvia. Because she was so much shorter, his head was up hard against her chest. While trying to push him back, she eyed Socrates. He had a big, lippy grin on his face. He didn't laugh because he didn't want to change Luvia's mind with a show of bloody teeth. What are you laughing at, Socrates Fortlow? He shook his head and kept smiling, swallowing blood all the while. Section 5. But what if I don't want to go? Daryl asked a week later. The McDanielses had said yes to taking him in, even before they met him. Luvia had told them everything she could to dissuade them. That means to convince them not to. But all they could think of was helping that boy. Luvia tells us that you had some troubles with the police in the past, Costas McDaniels said when they met in Socrates' small rooms. I was in prison, sir, Socrates said on his best behavior. Oh, said Mrs. McDaniels. She was plum-shaped and plum-colored. They were both tiny. But his voice was like a tuba, where hers was no more than the tinkle of a triangle. Such a Christian man, Hallie said. You must be very close to God to work so hard to help young Daryl. Socrates smiled and nodded a lot. The McDanielses said that he could come by to see Darrell any time he wanted. They preferred that Darrell stay away from Watts. Socrates smiled and nodded. He didn't like Hallie and Costas. They were cowed and cowardly, he thought. Cowed means that they are not self-confident and give too much deference to authority, that they don't stand up for themselves enough. But he also loved them because they had the power to do what he could not. Are you making me go because of what happened in the park? Oh, no, that's a statement, not a question. You're making me go because of what happened in the park, Darrell said. Because you're mad. You did fine in the park. Like I said, you did your best. I mean, because I was going to shoot Philip. That's why, huh? You're mad because you think it's wrong for black people to kill each other. But I almost did. No, said Socrates, nonchalant. Nonchalant means casually. Not seriously, not laughingly, just no. That boy humiliated you. He embarrassed you. He beat you. He tried to kill you. I don't even think a white man's court could find you guilty over that. But then why did you make me drop the gun? Because you don't know how to shoot. You probably would have shot some innocent bystander, and that wouldn't be good now, would it? I want to stay here with you, Darrell answered. You're going to see me every day almost at the supermarket. I'll come and visit you at the McDanielses, and you could come on down here whenever you want. Don't worry, Darrell. This here's going to be good for you. It's going to be good. I want you there. Your mother wants you there. And the McDanielses want you there. Only ones that want you down here is Philip and his wolf pack. That's all that want you here. Darrell nodded and hugged his big friend. When the McDanielses came to take him away, he cried. I never saw him cry before, Socrates was telling Wright later that night. They were chipping away at a fifth of PM whiskey. To be chipping away means to be drinking slowly, and a cheap fifth is a small amount of alcohol. I know it's got to be good if he could cry. Yes, Wright said. He was so drunk that he wavered or moved slowly. He couldn't sit up straight in his chair. The boy cried. And it's good for me too, Socrates added. You know it could get cramped in here with two people. Yup, Wright nodded. Yup. Can you make it home, Wright? Socrates asked. Wright looked up from his Dixie cup and blinked once, then once again. Nope, he said. That's okay, old man, Socrates said, laughing. You take my bed. Go on, before you fall on the floor. Mrs. Irene Fartwell walked all the way to Socrates as he sat at the small table in the little front room in Cartersville. He's dreaming again. The sky was blue in the picture window with the corn, and the corn was green. He put his big arms around her waist and laid his head against her breast. When she caressed his head, he fell into a deep sleep, not waking until morning. The streets were as noisy as ever, filled with booming radios from passing cars, police sirens, and loud talk. But still, it was the best sleep that he could remember.